I don't recall the first time as a child that I saw someone pray an Amidah. I don't recall the first time that I learned how to pray the Amidah, but I do recall the first times as a young adult. I saw those who build their lives around prayer daven so fervently. If you spend enough time in Jewish spaces, you'll almost inevitably find yourself at some point asking, why are we even praying? What's more, why in the Amidah are we saying this ancient, archaic, repetitive prayer? The simplest answer, the one that can feel like it belongs in Hebrew school, is that with our prayers, we're literally asking God to intervene in the world on our behalf. And there's value to this. We only have so much control in the world, and admitting our limitations and handing our hopes to a higher power is a helpful, maybe even necessary thing to do. At the same time, that is nowhere near the end of the story. More accessible than divine intervention is divine connection. True, we can live with the wonder of whether God intervenes, but the practice of prayer can be beneficial immediately as we connect with God and reflect upon the things that matter most in our lives. We'll explore all of these in the sessions to come. Changing the world starts with the act of transforming ourselves as moral agents. And prayer is the Jewish tradition's tool for doing that. When we call upon God to bring healing, we're charging ourselves with the task of being healers. When we call on God to restore systems of justice, we're implicating ourselves in the duty to do that work. Amidah in Hebrew means standing, and the prayer is called that because we recite it standing up. Of course, those who are unable to stand for it should sit. It's the centerpiece of each Jewish prayer service because it is the time when we most directly talk to God. We mark this by facing toward where the Jerusalem temple stood, which for me in America means turning east. With the right kind of mindfulness, the Amidah can be a thrilling place in the service because of how intimate it is, how expressive it can be, and how reflective it encourages us to be. It's a prayer that enables us to bring our whole selves into it and accept the challenge of being transparent before the divine. While the words of the Amidah are directly relevant in our daily lives, it's easy for us to forget its endless significance if we don't look at what's going on under the hood. If we grew up not attending synagogue services very often, all the ritual and language surrounding the Amidah can mask the meaning of what is actually going on. So too, if we had a comprehensive Jewish upbringing and were taught to repeat the Amidah regularly and by rote, we can forget the depths that the prayer can open our hearts to. We should start our study of this prayer by recognizing what the bones of the Amidah are. On weekdays, the Amidah consists of 19 blessings. It's commonly called the Shemoneh Esrei, 18, because as we'll see, the 19th blessing was added afterward. When we stand for the Amidah on Shabbat, there are 7 blessings, because on Shabbat, we're temporarily trying to live in a world in which all of our needs have been met, and we don't need to ask God for anything else, the time of radical contentment. And so the first 3 blessings of the Amidah are praise for God, called Shevach, and the final 3 are giving thanks, called Hoda'ah. The middle 13 are us asking God for things. These requests are called bakashot. It is said that this is how one would meet with a king or queen. First, you're going to praise them. Then you're going to make your requests. And finally, you're going to thank them. This is symbolized by the seemingly odd choreography we do around the Amidah. At the beginning of the prayer, we take 3 steps back and then 3 steps forward, as if we're stepping out of this chaotic world and into God's palace. Then we stand to pray with our feet together like an angel, with only one leg. And when we're done, we take 3 steps back and 3 steps forward, back into the world we're tasked with changing. It's been taught that in the merit of Nebuchadnezzar's 3 steps, he was granted the ability to destroy the temple in Jerusalem. And by taking 3 steps ourselves, we're counteracting that destruction. The Amidah can be said either alone or with a minyan, a congregation. In traditional synagogues, we actually do both. First, we say it silently, as if we're just at home alone. Then the prayer leader repeats it for everyone, for the group. Historically, the reason for this is Even going many centuries back in history, lots of Jews couldn't read Hebrew. But with the leaders saying it out loud, everyone could participate in this central prayer and mitzvah, saying Amen, affirming what is said. In our time, though, I think saying or hearing the Amidah isn't the only thing that Jews need. We need to explore these brachot, these blessings, and get a feel for how they align with our own longings, values, and spirituality. I think what we'll find is that each bracha takes on a new life of its own, becoming a new well for us to draw wisdom from. These words are ancient and scripted, but they can also be personal if we take the time to look inside them and look inside ourselves. We're often told that we want to have kavanah, intention, when we say these blessings. On one level, that can mean that we know the meaning of the words we're saying. Our words have intention because we know what they mean. But I think that as Jewish adults, the kavanah we should strive to cultivate is more of a meditative consciousness that allows the ancient words to take us on a journey into our brokenness, our ideal selves, the world as it is, and the world we ought to create. We love to look all over for the next exercise class or mindfulness program or therapy session that will fix us. But maybe one of our key tools is a prayer practice that has been there for countless generations. Our job is just to make it our own. That's not so easy, though, as attested to by the number of Jews who don't regularly pray. Before the words can bring us to God consciousness, we first need to get something of a sense of what they mean to us. On most days, there are 3 times to say the Amidah, in the morning, afternoon, and evening. On Shabbat, we add the Musaf service, reflecting the traditional temple sacrifices that used to take place on Shabbat. And on Yom Kippur, there's a 5th service, Ne'ilah. There's a theoretical practice of adding an extra Amidah in times of need, a nadava, but it's not usually done. How did prayer services come about? This is a topic debated early in the Talmud. We're told in Tractate Brachot. It was stated, Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, said, the practice of praying 3 times daily is ancient, albeit not in its present form. Prayers were instituted by the patriarchs, by the Avot. However, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said that the prayers were instituted based on the daily offerings sacrificed in the Holy Temple, and the prayers parallel the offerings in terms of both time and characteristics. And so, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi's notion is that we used to praise God by offering sacrifices in the temple in the morning, afternoon, and evening, and now we replace those korbanot, those sacrifices, with our prayer services. I find Rabbi Yossi's answer that the prayers come from the ancestors, from the Avot, to be perhaps more poetic. He argues that the morning prayer, Shacharit, comes from Avraham. As it says, and Avraham rose early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord, Genesis 19:27. The afternoon prayer, Mincha, comes from Yitzchak, and Isaac went out to converse, Lasua, in the field toward evening, Genesis 24:63. And the evening prayer, Ma'ariv, comes from Yaakov, and he encountered Vayifga, the place, and he slept there for the sun had set, Genesis 28:11. A few pages later, the Talmud roots our prayers in the example set by Hannah in the book of Shmuel, the book of Samuel. We learn, Rav Hamnuna said, how many significant halachot can be derived from these verses of the prayer of Hannah? As it says, and Hannah spoke in her heart, only her lips moved, and her voice could not be heard. So Eli thought her to be drunk. That's from the first book of Samuel 1:13. The Gemara elaborates, from that which is stated here, and Hannah spoke in her heart, the halakha that one who prays must focus his heart on his prayer is derived. And from that which is stated here, only her lips moved. The halakha that one who prays must enunciate the words with his lips, not only contemplate them in his heart, is derived. From that which is written here, and her voice could not be heard, the halakha that one is forbidden to raise his voice in his Amidah prayer, as it must be recited silently. From the continuation of the verse here, so Eli thought her to be drunk, the halakha that a drunk person is forbidden to pray. That is why he rebuked her. To this model, we whisper the Amidah in the silent prayer as we emulate Hannah. The models of both the sacrifices and the ancestors are compelling. When we stand for the Amidah, it is simultaneously akin to bringing an offering and emulating the spiritual journeying of our forebears. While certain prayer services can be long, especially in the morning, the handful of minutes we spend on the Amidah can be the pinnacle of our prayer experience. The Amidah is considered so important that it's taught in the Talmud, even if a snake is wrapped around his heel, he may not interrupt his prayer. Putting the Amidah's significance into other terms, the Kabbalist Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Morgenstern teaches that the stages of the morning prayers are like an ascent from world to world. First, with the recitation of the ancient sacrifices, we're in the Asiyah, the world of action. When we move on to Pesukei de Zimra, the warm-up verses of praise, mainly from Tehillim, from Psalms, we enter Yitzirah, the world of angels. Later, he says, during the blessings of Yotzer Or, we rise to the level of Seraphim, the fiery angel, which is the world of Bria. It's only with the Amidah, though, that we reach the highest world, Atzilut. This happens because the meditative state of the Amidah can bring us to absolute self-nullification before Hashem. It is not that the feeling of being a self is necessarily so bad. But if you've ever had a spiritual experience, you know that the fullest feeling of unity comes when we almost forget who we are, when the borders between ourselves and the universe briefly disappear. We live so much of our lives consumed with how we look, what we'll eat, what we'll wear, where we'll live, and what kind of social status we'll be able to achieve. And there's good reasons why we're often self-consumed. We have lives to live and jobs to do, and that requires often being focused on ourselves. Without a deep mindfulness practice, though, we forget that in reality, our solitary selves are not that significant. In the scheme of things, we're not truly separate from the rest of the universe. We're of the universe. To not lose sight of that, we must briefly take off the costume of the self. The Amidah is the method we've inherited of experiencing this kind of self-transcendence. And I hope you'll join me as we learn together how to use it.